Going? Going. I guess it's going. Records are ordered. I ordered 20 copies of the album on vinyl, and I wanted to take a minute to talk about kind of the gymnastics I did to get what I think are good master recordings for the vinyl record. I grew up with vinyl, but I kind of didn't understand until I had to get my music ready to put on vinyl very much about how vinyl records actually make music, how they store sound. And I am still by no means an expert, but I learned a few things as I was trying to get the tracks ready to send off. It was a little daunting when I first looked online. It's like, oh, for vinyl mastering, oh, you have to have a special engineer, and he's going to master it for vinyl. It's going to sound great, because if you don't, you're going to be screwed. Your record's going to skip. It's going to sound terrible. It's going to be distorted. And I thought, well, geez, that would suck if I put a lot of money into having records pressed and they all sounded terrible. But at the same time, I can't afford to pay somebody $50 or $100 or even more per track to make it sound good on a record that I'm going to produce 20 copies of. So I had to come up with a solution. So the first thing I did was I looked and I thought, well, maybe I could do this myself. And then it seemed kind of daunting because there was a lot of how it's a special skill and you got to know this and you got to do that. So I went to Fiverr, where I've had a lot of good experience finding musicians to help me do different things that I can't do. And I found a couple people who said that they would master tracks for vinyl. One guy cost $5 a track, super, super affordable. The other guy cost 20, but he would also do a digital master. So I thought, well, scientist in my brain, if I give them both the same song, it cost me $25, I can compare and see what they did differently and try to understand what that means. So I did. The results came back to my ear totally different. If there is a single way to master for vinyl so it sounds good, how come these two people who say they know how to do it gave me such different results? And that got me kind of back in to the circle of trying to figure it out myself, and I decided that I was just going to do it myself because I didn't think that the masters that they sent me kind of matched what my expectations were for what things should sound like before they go on vinyl. So I got back into the weeds again on the vinyl stuff and decided that I was going to do it myself after all. You have to understand a little bit about what the record is doing. A vinyl record has a needle. I just happen to have a vinyl record with me. Vinyl. If I can get the light right here. There you go. You see all the little grooves, and there's those visual gaps in between. That's a whole nother story. But it's one continuous groove, and the needle goes in, and it converts the mechanical energy of vibrating in the groove into electrical energy, which then gets reconverted into mechanical energy in the speaker, and it amplifies it that way. It's still kind of magical, a magical mystery to me, how you control for volume and how you get a stereo sound, how you get sound going to left to right through there, but the needle goes back and forth in the grooves. That's the vibration. Lower frequencies require a bigger vibration going back and forth, so the groove has to be wider. One of the reasons that for vinyl you turn the bass down is because if those grooves get really wide, if there's a really, really big bass sound, it's hard for the needle to keep up, and the grooves can actually run into each other. So they come around to the other one, and there's no hard space between adjacent grooves. They get too crowded together and they run in. And then the needle skips. So you miss part of the music, part of the record, and it skips over into the next track. Make the bass a mono, so it's not going back and forth in stereo and causing that needle to go all over the place. And it has to be tamed down. And record players emphasize the bass more as it comes out because they know it has to be turned down on the record. So when you make the master for vinyl, you're turning the bass down, and it sounds kind of wimpy and not super bassy, but that's kind of what it has to be in order to kind of live within that mechanical environment of the vinyl record. At least that's my understanding. So that's one thing that you should do. And the other, you have a problem with higher frequencies, what's called, I'm going to say it wrong, sibilance or sibilance, I don't remember, but it's all the S sounds in a certain frequency range. They're kind of compounding into each other, and that can also cause the record to skip. So you have to tame those down. So the steps that I came up with based on what I read are it's easy to do some of these things in the mix rather than the master, which of course I have the mixes. Difference between mixing and mastering. Mixing is getting all of the different tracks to kind of work and play well together at relative volumes. So, you know, your guitar sounds right, it's where it is in the sound landscape, it's in one ear or the other ear, so you can separate things and hear them, and that's the mix. And then the master is kind of doing the EQ for the whole track and putting the volume for the whole thing at an appropriate level. So those are kind of two separate steps. They're linked, but they're separate. So you mix things first, and once you get a good mix, then you master it. And if you're mastering it for digital, it's different than if you're mastering it for vinyl. So you go back to the mix, or at least I went back to the mix, and I lowered the volume of the bass. I really, really like the bass on this album. The musician I found to do that, Annalisa Vitrugno, is an Italian woman, and I think she's fantastic, and I really like it. So I probably tended to actually put the bass parts up too high in the mix because I really like to hear them. Anyway, I lowered those down a hair, and then I ran a de-esser filter on the vocals, just to make sure that there wasn't a lot of S-ing coming from there, and also on the drums, because you get a lot of hi-hats and cymbals that will create those S sounds in that same frequency. So that's what I did in the mix. And I re-exported those, and then once I got the song into master, I ran a high-pass filter, which I believe is the same thing that people call a low-cut filter, but I ran that over the whole entire song at a frequency of 150 hertz with a 12 dB slope. So that means underneath that frequency of 150 hertz, which is low, it will cut that down. So you're taking out a lot of that bottom end. It's taking out a lot of that big beefy part of the bass for the reason that the bass needs to be tamed. So we are taming that bass. So that's step number one. I used a filter curve EQ in the Audacity software to reduce the frequencies between 3 and 10 kilohertz. And this was just a figure, like I don't know all these things off the top of my head, but this was what I saw online. Like that's kind of where a lot of that S-ing part comes in, so you notch that down a little bit. Maybe I took it down too much, maybe I didn't take it down enough. I don't know, maybe my record will sound like crap. I don't know, I won't know until I get them. And then I did a little bit of clipping or amplifying, also in Audacity. I'm doing all of this in Audacity, which is a free program, to reduce the volume to about -6 dB. Now I saw some recommendations online that your master volume should be at -10 to -12 dB, and I tried that, and it just sounded so super soft. It's like there's got to be more headroom. So I sent an email to Rob at Little Elephant, which is where I'm getting the records made. He's like, yeah, that's pretty low. -6 should be fine. That still gives you some room up there. So that's what I went with, and I think it sounds good. The masters actually sound like things that I could hear as things that mastered for vinyl. So anyway, the whole volume thing with vinyl is interesting. There used to be a lot more dynamic range in sound recordings, and then once things went digital, you have these loudness wars where, you know, you can take it all the way up to the very top of the range of something without clipping or distortion. You can use all of this compression and bring it all up there. So a lot of the music, especially from the 90s and the early 2000s, just sounds to me like it's just like all in your face the whole time, which I like that sometimes, but it was actually nice to go back and think about, like, you know, you can have quiet parts and distant parts and parts that you might have to strain to hear a little bit. It doesn't all have to be at 11 in your face all the time with the speakers like right there in your car. Like it's a different kind of experience. So that was experience, man. Hey, you only get so many years on this earth. So anyway, I went through that process with every track and assembled them all and sent them off. So we'll see. The records will be here in a month or two, hopefully, and we'll see if I did it right or not. I'm only getting 20 records, cost me like 500 some bucks. I've got pre-orders for about half. I'm going to keep a couple copies, send a few copies to the musicians and so on. So I think I'm good. It's an experiment. You do what you do. Anyway, I'm going to show you on this program here the different kinds of mastering and what I ended up with, and this is just as much to remind me in the future of why I did this, whether I did it right or wrong. I don't have a bunch of fancy stuff to put on the actually like show you my screen. So I'm just going to point the camera at the screen, listen, then I'll just put some of those clips on so you can hear what I'm talking about. I'm going to use Simple Me because that's the one I sent. So top version is my digital master, and then I've got Vinyl Master that I paid for, version 1, Vinyl Master that I paid for, version 2, and then the Vinyl Master that I made. The waveform here is just showing you, this is amplitude, I guess would be the right word. So, that's the limits of loudness before it distorts. So it's showing you how much of that it's filling up. So very, very different results. This guy's Vinyl Master versus this guy's. They're emphasizing this guy's got all kinds of peaks and stuff in there. I don't know whether those are the snares or what. Maybe we can figure that out. And then mine, which is pretty quiet and has a lot of headroom. So I've got my headphones on. Everything is muted except this first mix. So I'm going to play this. Familiar?
What happened to you? What happened to me? Slipping into
nice loud bass.
Do you ever wish you were more than just ordinary?
So the mix is all the way up. Put this on solo and listen to vinyl mix number 1. Actually, it doesn't sound that different to me. The volume level still -1 or -2. Bass is still really high. So that didn't sound that different to me than the digital version. And then we'll try this other guy's Vinyl Master. It sounds weird. That snare is somehow so loud in that. Sounds like Saint Anger. Same volume level. They've got it pumped all the way up to the limits. But it's just punchy. So I wasn't sure what to make of that. And then my vinyl attempt, following, the recipe that I found online, sounds quieter. It's tame. The limits in the loudest parts are going to be at -6, so they're on a lot of spikes. The low end is gone. So I don't know, man. I guess I will find out when I get the records back. Unfortunately, my record player is actually pretty crappy, so I was thinking about buying another one with detached speakers. That's another thing that good record players, because of the vibrations, like they don't have the speakers. I've owned a couple of record players that I have loved over the years, but none of them have made it to this stage in my life. So I might have to go buy a new one. And with the recent vinyl revival, I think there are a lot of good options. I just haven't looked into them, and I would need to buy a preamp or an amplifier for it too to power the speakers. So I won't really know, I guess, until I get my records back. But I've committed. Whether I did it right or wrong, absolutely beats the hell out of me. But I don't know. Could sound like crap. Wouldn't be the first time I've produced something that sounds like crap. So there you go. I will keep you posted.